I'm a Northeast guy. I knew Chris Canyon from the Indies,
Yeah.
from doing jobs on WFTV. I knew Brian Clark. I wrestled him when he was Adam Bomb. Talk to me about adding those two to the Glacier mix.
Oh man, it was so awesome. I mean, I'm actually getting ready. We're launching my good buddy Avi Klein, who I did a podcast with a little while back, where he's launching this new network tonight called the New Network with KNEW. And I'm going to have a show on there called Breaking the Ice, and Brian's going to have a show on there as well. And we were great friends before then. We came up kind of on the Indies up there in North Georgia, and we've been great friends ever since. So it was cool to be working with Brian. I had not really met Canyon until I met him through Disco and Dallas and Atlanta, and we became fast friends too because we were chasing the same dream, you know. And I just admired his passion for wrestling, which was the same passion I had, which was, you know, if any spare time we had, we were watching tapes, you know, back when we had to watch tapes, and or we were talking wrestling, or we were, you know, Canyon was. I think he collected every episode or every edition of the wrestling newsletters that ever came out back when they actually still mailed them out, you know. And but I was never a big newsletter guy. I mean, I you know, for whatever, you know, I mean, nothing, no disrespect to any of the writers because I think they're all amazing, but I just wasn't one of those things where I was never like, oh my God, what's this writer who's never done what I've done? What's he saying about me? You know.
Right.
But Canyon was, and by him being that guy, you know, I learned a lot from him, and I feel like we both learned a lot from each other. But the best thing that came out of everything that we did together in the ring was just the friendship. You know, I mean, we were genuinely, me and Canyon, Disco, Jim Mitchell, you know, James Vandenberg, our whole crew there. Ernest, I mean, the first time I ever met Ernest, I became fast friends with Ernest. Literally, I had the best time with him the first time I ever met him, and he's still one of my truly great friends to this day. You know, we talk like all the time, and we're actually doing an appearance at the big event coming up on March the 11th up in New York. Nice. So, but yeah, I mean, I just it's, you know, when I kind of akin pro wrestlers to like musicians, you know, like when musicians are traveling and they're doing their thing and they're just doing it because they love it. They're trying to find their place in the world. All of a sudden you meet another musician who's got that same passion. All of a sudden now you have the music brings you together, but all of a sudden, because you're like-minded and all some of your things, you become great friends. And that's kind of how it happened with me and Canyon. And I always say that hands down, I feel like I had the best chemistry with Canyon in the ring that I did with anybody ever. And it's just, you know how it is. I mean, there's certain people, you can't really explain it. You just click. Things just work. And there's times when you get two individually great wrestlers, and for whatever reason, they just don't click in the ring, right. You know? And it's not a slight against either one. It's just like two great dancers. You can have two great dancers. Sometimes they just don't click. And you can have two maybe very, you know, moderate dancers, but them together are a whole lot stronger of a team than each one individually. And I felt like he and I really were. I mean, we could, you know, we went hard, man. We did. I mean, we were always safe with each other, but, you know, we always felt like personally we had something to prove, you know. Sure. And when I say that, not against each other, we had something to prove together to the world. Like, hey, you know, there's a lot of people that think this thing's kind of hokey. A lot of people think it's stab, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing they'll never be able to pick apart is the stuff we did in the ring. You know, we and that's how, you know, Eric, I commend Eric for this. I mean, he always wanted us to pitch it in the ring. He said, I want you guys to be heavyweights that wrestle more like cruiserweights. And that was when the Lucha Libre was really finally, he was bringing that over a lot. So a lot of the world, the Western world hadn't seen that a lot. But our thing that Canyon and I and Brian and Ernest, but especially me and Canyon, were very big on is everything we do has to look really good, has to look believable, you know, and if we nail each other, you know, or stiff each other's, at least in safe areas, you know, where, you know, if I get kick me in the arm, kick me in the head, or kick me in the leg or whatever. But the other thing is that it has to make sense. Everything we do has to make sense. It's got to be put in a place where because we can't just do a kick to do a kick, you know, and that's one of the things today. I mean, I obviously there's enough of a fan base that people follow some. I love wrestling. I always want wrestling to be great, but I know just from when I see people wrestling, and some of the ones that I've coached, I coach them. Just make everything make sense. Put it in a place where it makes sense. And they still don't. And I tell them all the time, look, maybe that will get you by. Maybe it will. Maybe there is a smaller audience for that. And I get it. But I promise you, if you just put it in order that makes sense, there's a much bigger audience that will get it. And who would you rather perform for? This or this? And if you're okay with this, okay. But just know there's a bigger pie that you can be eating from if you just make it make sense. And all that takes is just a little bit more work mentally to just say, okay. And I always remember the example that I would always use. If you take a 10-chapter story and you put chapter 3 where chapter 8 goes, all the elements are still there, but the story just doesn't make sense now, you know?
I like that.
Yeah. And it's just like, so yes, you have the chapters of the story, but they need to be in an order that makes sense to the audience, you know, because the audience won't work too hard to try to figure it out. But so Canyon and I, the whole point of that was a big, almost nearly obsessive thing with us is everything has to make sense. There's got to be an order where it makes sense, you know, and I feel like we did that. Every now and then we throw something in there, just goes, oh, that was cool, we'll throw that in. And we couldn't figure out exactly where it made sense. Like, oh, we'll just throw it in there, you know. But yeah, he was one of the greatest minds I'd ever seen for this business. So if individually we couldn't figure out, usually if we sat down together and we just go to the power plant, we would seek the advice of Jody Hamilton and Pez Watley and Sarge, those guys, and you know, all whoever else to Dallas. I mean, you put those heads together, you can usually find a way to make anything make sense, you know. So yeah, but I miss him terribly. He was a great friend. I mean, great wrestler, but even more than that, he was a great friend, and I do terribly miss him. I really do.